Let's see how to use Flex in Tailwind CSS. So at the moment I have basically an empty page and I already have Tailwind CSS installed. And the first thing I want to do is to create here a div with 3 elements. And here it is, here is the div, and it contains 3 other divs, and each of these divs contain its own text. Now at the moment they are displayed one beneath each other in a column because this is the default behavior of divs. Every div is displayed on a new line. Using Flex we can change this behavior, and this is actually one of the most popular uses for Flex. Display elements side by side that are by default displayed one beneath each other. So to achieve that, I'm going to add a Tailwind class to this div, to the containing div. So for this div, let's add a new class, and it's simply going to be Flex. And if I save my file, we can see that now the items are shown next to each other. Now the thing is that at the moment they are adjacent to each other. There is no space in between. If we want to add some space between them, we can use the gap class. So let's add this class here, and I'm simply going to add gap. Then we need to choose how big we want the gap to be. For example, I'll go with gap 2. And let's save the file, and we can see that now we have some space in between them. Let me also add a bit of margin, so we will have some space between the heading 1 and the text here. So here I'll add MT3. Okay, and now we have some vertical space. And as we can see, by default, the elements are aligned to the left. This is the default behavior, and it can be changed. If we want, for example, the entire Flex element to be centered, we can use the justify center class. So let's try to use it. So justify center, and let's save the file, and we can see that the entire element is now centered horizontally. In a similar fashion, we can also use the justify end class, and now all of the elements are aligned to the right. We can also distribute the space among the elements equally, and to do that we can use the justify between class, and now we can see that the Flex element is using all of the available space, and most of this space is between our elements. And there is also another similar class which is called justify around, and let's try this one. And as you can see, now they are much closer to each other. So justify between and justify around are actually quite similar. The difference is that for justify around, we're also going to have space in the edges. So to the left and to the right, we now have some space. Using Flex, we can also change the vertical layout of the child elements. To see that, we're going to add here another div, and this one is also going to use the Flex class. And now inside this div, I'm going to add 3 more divs, and these divs will simply be colorful boxes. So here are the boxes, and as you can see, they have different heights. So the green one is shorter, then the blue one is taller, and the purple one is the tallest. And once again, the reason that they are shown next to each other is that the parent element, this div, uses the Flex class. Because if it didn't use Flex, like this, they would be shown, or they are shown, as a vertical column below each other. But because I want us to see the vertical alignment, I want to bring back the Flex class. And to do that, we are going to use different classes. And the reason is that in Flex, there is the concept of main axis and cross axis. So what do I mean by main axis and cross axis? So it depends on the direction of the Flex, because Flex can be either for a row or for a column. The default is row, and in this case, the main axis is the horizontal axis. But we can also use Flex to define a column. So if here I'm adding Flex column, like this, then once again, the elements are shown one below each other, even though they belong to the same Flex element, because the direction of this Flex is column. For a column, the main axis is the vertical axis, and the cross axis is the horizontal axis. But the default direction of Flex is row, so if I don't have Flex call, the elements are shown next to each other, and the main axis is the horizontal axis. But now we want to change the behavior of the cross axis. We want to align the elements vertically, even though the direction of this Flex element is the horizontal direction, or a row. So in this case, because this Flex is a row, the cross axis is the vertical axis. So to do that, we can use classes of the type items-start. And if I save it now, we don't see any change because this is the default behavior. But if I change it, for example, to items-end, like this, we can see that the items are now aligned to the bottom, or to the end of the cross axis. We can of course also align them to the center. So I can write here items center, and now their vertical centers are aligned. Let's now change our boxes so that they will all have the same height. And let's once again use the first Flex element. So I'm going to delete this, and this way our boxes will belong to this flex element, the first one. And we can see that now, because we are using the justify around class, the flex element uses all of the width available, and the space is spread equally among the elements, including the edges to the left and to the right. Let's now remove the justify around class, and now the boxes are still next to each other, but they are all aligned to the left. Using flex, we can change the distribution of space among these elements. So by default, every element only takes the space it needs. And in our case, we define the width for each of the boxes, so this is exactly the width it takes. But now we're going to specify how exactly we want this space to be spread among the elements. And to do that, we're going to go to the children, and for each of them, we're going to add the flex-1 class. And now we can see that the space is spread equally. So even though the base width of each of them is different, they are now stretched so that they take all of the available space. And because they all use flex-1, they are stretched to an equal degree. Moreover, we can even delete their widths, and it still looks exactly the same. Now, if we didn't have flex-1, we wouldn't see them at all. And this is because now they don't have any width. But if we add flex-1, they are all stretched, and the three of them now have the same width. I can also change the ratios. So if, for example, the first one is going to be -1, but the second one is going to be -2, and the third one -3, then we can see that this determines the ratios. The second one is now twice as wide as the first one, and the third one is 3 times as wide as the first one. Moreover, using this method, we can also make one of them completely disappear. So let's, for example, remove the flex2 from the second one, and now we can only see the first one and the third one, and the third one is 3 times as wide as the first one. Let's now see a practical example in which flex can be very useful. And this is to create a simple layout for a simple to-do app. So let me replace my boxes with a checkbox, a span for text, and a trash bin icon. And here we have it, the checkbox, the text, and the trash bin icon. And now, a common layout for UIs of this type is to have some space here. We probably want the checkbox to be very close to the text, but maybe we want some space between the text and the trash bin icon. So to achieve that, I'm going to allocate all of the space of the flex element to the text. And as we have seen, we can easily do that using the flex-1, for example, or flex-something, to only one of the elements. So in my case, I want only the span element to take more space. Because right now, all of the elements only take the space that they actually need. But I want my span element to take more than that. And this is why here in my span, I'm going to add the class of flex-1. And now my flex element is taking all of the available width, but within it, it's only the span element that's actually taking all of this space. And just to make it very clear that we don't have some kind of space here. It is actually the span element that's taking all of this space. Let me add a background color to the span and to the trash bin icon. And we can see that our flex element is taking all of the available space, and specifically within it, it is the span element that's actually using up all of this width. Let's now remove these background colors. And let's now say that I want this space here, but I don't want the entire flex element to use all of the width. I want it to be wide, but not this wide, right? Not all of the width of the page. So to confine it, I'm going to wrap it within another div. So let's add here another div. And now I'm going to set the width of the containing div. So this one is going to have a maximum width, so max W, of, for example, MD. And we can see that now the flex element is still wide, but not as wide. It's not actually using all of the available space of the page. And what if we want to center this element, right? Let's say that I have a long list of to-do items and I want all of them to be in the center of the page. So this is another thing that can be easily achieved using flex. So here I'm going to wrap everything within another div. And this wrapping div is also going to belong to the flex class. And I want its children to be centered, so I'm also going to add here justify center. The thing is that we now lost the space between the text and the trash bin icon. And this is because we never specified the width to the child of the flex element. So this div, it has a maximum width, but it doesn't have minimum width. So all of the children collapse to their original width, and we don't have any extra width in between. So what we're going to do is to add to this div the wFull class, and this will cause this div to take as much width as it can. But of course, it's still going to be confined by this class, So the maximum width of this class is never going to be more than what's defined by maxwmd. And if we save it now, we see that the entire flex element is centered, but we do have this significant space between the text and the trash bin icon. So this is a very popular way to center elements using flex. And once again, I want to remind you that we can look at the flex element either as a row or as a column. So I could, for example, say that this flex is going to be a column flex, so flex-col. But now that it is a column, if we want to center its children, it's not going to be justify center, because now we're talking about the cross-axis. So now it's going to be items center. And it still looks exactly the same way. But now the outer flex element is regarded to as a column and not as a row.